Hey guys, welcome back to Shop Life. First things first, thank you guys for the 500 subscribers. It really does mean a lot. I'm glad that I'm able to help other people learn on how to work on their own cars. So today we're gonna do a video on putting, if you did a performance header modification for the E46, we're gonna show you how to replace it back to stock, or if you have stock, if you wanna put performance ones, same process, just different things are coming off. All right, so I'm gonna show you guys how to replace these headers. Main reason we're replacing these headers is they suck. I'm gonna make a separate video on reviewing the headers and why they suck, and you guys can watch that. That way you can decide if you wanna get them for your car or not. So this car is a 325. The headers process is pretty much the same for the whole E46 chassis. We're gonna go ahead and first start out by removing all the panels from underneath the car. All right, so first things first, what you're gonna wanna do is remove the plastic trays that are down here. This car doesn't have them. As you can see, I already took off the front bumper. But pretty much they're gonna be held in with Phillips screws. So just take all those out, get the plastic tray off. Once you have the plastic tray off, what we're gonna do now is remove this reinforcement plate. It's gonna be held in with 16mm bolts. BMW says these are one-time use bolts. I don't buy that. I mean, I'm just gonna reuse them anyways. So go ahead and take them all out. And don't mind all the oil. We're gonna be tracking that down in another video. Alright, so now what we're going to do is we're going to remove the bolts or nuts from right here. This is pretty much where the second section meets the headers. On this car, since it already has performance headers, the bolts are different. These are 14mm bolts that are going through here. If you have stock headers, you're going to have bolts that are pretty much, there's like a little stud that goes through the OEM header going that way, and you're going to have a nut from right here. You're going to have 4 of them, one right here, one right there, one right here, and one up there. So they're most likely going to be rusted, so make sure you soak them with PB Blaster or WD-40. That way it'll loosen up the rust and it'll be easier to take off. They should either be 15mm nuts or 14. And if it's really badly rusted on there, you're probably going to have to cut it off. And you can use a Dremel tool to cut those off. And one thing I do recommend is if you don't have an electric impact gun, go get one from Harbor Freight. This will make this process a lot easier. So yeah, now I'm going to go and remove these bolts. Alright, so now that we have the bolts out of the exhaust, you can pretty much pry this second section off of the bolt, or if you have the headers, you should be able to just pop it off. So you see how it's loose now, this whole back section? If you want to make it easier, what you can do is you can remove this whole thing, but you're probably going to need 2 people to do it, or at least have a jack back there or something. Pretty much all the bolts holding it in are 13s. There's going to be about 8 bolts right here. You see those 2 black plates? Let me go and show you. So you got to remove both of these black plates. That's 8 bolts. You might have something coming off of the transmission that bolts to the exhaust. This car doesn't have that, but if you do, there's going to be 2 bolts right here. Just remove those 2 bolts, and then you're going to have rubber mounts in the back. So here's the muffler right here. Let me go and show you those 2 rubber mounts. You see there's one right here. This is on the not passenger side, but this is on the right of the muffler if you're looking at it from the back. And there's a nut right there, and there's one on this side right here. And that's the one on the driver's side near the bumper. Alright, so now that we have the exhaust unhooked from the headers, what we're going to do is we're going to make some space up here. We're going to take off the windshield washer reservoir, and we're going to take off the secondary air pump. Alright, so these are held in with 10s. There's one right here. And this should be ready to come off. You're going to have to unhook the pump. There's a clip that holds the pump in. Just press that clip in, and there's the connector for that. Then you're also going to have the actual water, the feed that goes to the windshield washer jets. So you're going to just unhook that. If you have fluid in here, just be careful, it might just fly out. And then you have one more for the level. There you go. And that's the windshield washer reservoir. Once you have that out, now we're going to go and remove the secondary air pump. First, you're going to have to unhook the hose. What I would recommend is just go ahead and take off the hose from up here, and then we can go ahead and take this part off after that. As you can, this one's being stubborn, and the mount for the air pump is also busted. So we're just gonna take it out from the bottom. You might have a different style secondary air pump depending on the year of your car. So if you have a different style, just see how it comes off. I don't remember off of the top of my head, but it should just be bolts holding it in. All right, that's that. Now we can go ahead and remove the mount for the secondary air pump. It's held in by 3 10s. And then lastly, you're gonna have to remove the connector. There's 2 little clips on each side. Just push the clips in and pull out. There's a secondary air pump. Now we're gonna go ahead and remove this part right here and this bracket. They're also held in with 10s. Alright, so now what you're gonna do is you're gonna remove the vacuum line that goes from the pump all the way to the back of the intake. So it just pulls right off. There's no clamps on it. And if yours is very dry rotted, it might break. So just make sure you have an extra one on hand. And basically, if it breaks, there's a hard line that goes all the way to the back, and this is the rubber hose that hooks up to this. So just all you need is pretty much a little extra rubber hose that you can hook up to the hard line. And if the hard line breaks, then you have to go all the way back to the back of the intake, and you have to replace that whole hard line. All of this you can find at your local parts store, so just in case if it does break when you're working, you can just head over to the parts store, just take the old line with you and they'll match it up for you. Alright, so now, this little thing right here, there's 2 10mm nuts that hold it to the actual engine itself. You can see where I'm going in from right here. There's 1 on each side. You are gonna need a new gasket when you put this back on. Basically that gasket will make it airtight, so that way you don't have a vacuum leak. Here it is. So this is where the 2 nuts go in through. There's bolts that come off of the engine, and then you just hook up to right there. And the gasket will cover this right here. Alright, so what we're gonna do now, before we go to start unbolting the headers, what we're gonna do is we're gonna take off the O2 sensor plugs. So basically, here's one right here. As you can see, since these are headers, the plugs are already taken off. But there's one right here, and there's another one that should be right here. And then there's 2 more underneath the covers. Let me go and take the covers off for you. There's 1 more bolt back there. If you do have it, you can use a smaller wrench and get it. It's a 10mm. Once you have the cover off, you'll see 2 more plugs. 1 right here and 1 right there. And they should be plugged in, but since the headers, when you put headers, if you don't put like an O2 fouler or some solution to let the O2 sensor like work, then there's no point of even hooking them up. And on these specific headers, the O2 sensors wouldn't even fit down there. So what I had to do is either remove them and put a block off plate. That way there wouldn't be a big exhaust leak. So once I take these headers out, I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. Alright, so as you can see, since we have the performance headers, we have a lot more space right here to work with. But with that added space, there's also a downside, because some of the bolts that hook up to the headers, which is all the way underneath here, you can't really access them because the actual pipes are in the way. On stock headers, you're gonna have a little bit less space, but there are grooves, that way you can use an extension and get onto the nuts and bolts that are usually holding the headers on. So on here, we're gonna have to go from underneath and the top and wiggle our ways out. One more thing that you're gonna have difficulty with is trying to get the header out from the car. So this, I'm honestly not sure which way I'm gonna go with this yet. There's 2 ways to do this. The first way is just try to figure out a way to wiggle it out without removing anything else. The second way is you're gonna have to have some kind of hoist or something to hold the engine up. And what you'll have to do is you're gonna have to jack up the engine a very slight bit, remove the engine mount, and then remove the mount arm from the block itself. That way you have all that space down there to wiggle out the header. Also, along with that, you might have to remove the front subframe that holds the whole motor up, which is why you're gonna need some kind of hoist to hold all of this together. That way the engine just doesn't go straight down. You can use a normal engine hoist like the crane right there, and just hook it up to the front of the engine right here. You don't have to worry about getting the back because the transmission mounts will hold that. So just hook it up to the front and keep tension on it and then remove that whole subframe. So first what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go ahead and take off all the bolts and nuts that are holding the headers on, and if we can wiggle them out, that's what we'll do. All right, so what we're gonna do now, like I said, we're gonna remove the bolts off of the headers. Even if you have stock headers, it's gonna be a little tricky. So you're gonna need a bunch of different extensions. All right, so you can get some swivel extensions like this. You can get some wobble extensions like this, which allow the socket to wobble just a little bit. And then you're gonna need a bunch of wrenches. I'll get different sizes. These are 11s because all the bolts and nuts are gonna be 11s for the headers. And then just get different size sockets and different size wrenches as well. I mean, socket wrenches. All right, and if you could get any ratchety ones, like ratchety 11s like this, it's gonna make your life a lot easier. That way you don't have to keep removing it. All right, so let's get started.